Our sponsors for the event, that's PISLM, and notable Mr. Johan James. He is the project manager for PISLM Dominica. Rhoda St. John, we have the Dominica Solid Waste Management Corporation and manager of the Dominica Solid Waste Management Corporation, Mr. Florian Mitchell. The high school students from the Rosa District, that's representative of the Dominica State College District. We have Academic School of Learning students, UE Open Campus, and the St. Mary's Academy, Dominica Grammar School, and Convent High School, and everyone who is present both in person and viewing online, and of course our dedicated CYEN Dominica members. Good morning. My name is Fudis Environment. I am the Public Relations Officer for the Caribbean Youth Environment and the esteemed Master of Ceremonies for this auspicious occasion. Welcome to what we would consider a timely and important avenue where the most pressing issue affecting the world, but most importantly small island developing states like Dominica. Considering the growing urgency to address climate change, particularly in vulnerable regions like Dominica, the Ministry of Environment and the Caribbean Environment Network Dominica chapter have recently solidified their commitment to youth engagement by partnering with each other on a series of projects. As part of this, the Youth Action in Climate Adaptation and Sustainable Land Management, or TABLE, was conceptualized with the aim that it would serve as a key for executing this partnership by providing a platform for youth, government officials, and environmental activists to discuss critical issues and solutions related to climate adaptation and sustainable land management. This roundtable is an important avenue or opportunity to strengthen the collaboration between the government, PISLM, and the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. This, of course, will help in collectively seeking to build a more resilient and sustainable future. It will highlight youth perspectives, amplify their voices, and identify tangible ways that the government and PISLM can support youth-led initiatives in climate adaptation and sustainable land management in Dominica. We are extremely grateful for this partnership and look forward to future engagements. I would now like to ask everyone to stand for the national anthem of the Commonwealth of Dominica. Hills and mountains, all these gifts we do extol. Healthy land so like all fountains, giving cheer that warms the soul. Thank you so much. Please remain standing as we welcome the Vice Chair of the Communications Committee, Zebediah Maxwell, for the prayer.
Let us bow our heads and close our eyes as we give praises and thanks to our Creator, God the Most High, Jah. Jah, thank you for safeguarding and protecting each and everyone here in attendance today, as well as our viewers on their journeys from home to their destinations. We gather today with hearts full of hope and determination. We ask for your guidance and wisdom as we discuss ways to protect and sustain our beautiful Dominican environment and, by extension, the Caribbean region. Bless the efforts of CYN Dominica, PISLM, and the Ministry of Environment. May our conversations be fruitful, our partnership strong, and our actions impactful. Grant us the courage to make bold decisions for a resilient and sustainable future, where our discussion today can be made into action. For it is our duty to sustainable use for the resources that you have blessed us with. Thank you for your many blessings and provisions. Praises, Haile I, Selassie I, the first King Rastafari, and Haile I, Empress Menen. To our Creator, thank you for your everlasting glory and for the earth you have blessed us with. Amen. Sila.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maxwell. We will now welcome Mr. Lucian Blackmore, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Environment, for the featured address. Mr. Lucian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me recognize the presence of Honorable Kozia Frederick, who is the Minister for the Environment, Rural Modernization, Karinago Upliftment, and Constituency Empowerment. Mr. Edgar Hunter, who is the Senior Technical Advisor in the Ministry of Environment. Mr. Michel Dunburton, who is the Director of Forestry. And Mr. Florian Mitchell, who is the General Manager of Donica Solid Waste Management Corporation. Distinguished teachers and students of the various secondary schools. I see the smartest male alive very first today, so that's an inspiration to me. No disservice to you, Mr. Burton. I know you're not an SME man, but I am one, so I proudly say so. Viewers and listeners, a very good morning to everyone. Of course, we're here today to look at Youth in Action, and the Dominica branch of our Caribbean Youth Environmental Network, of course, is at the forefront of today's deliberation, looking at youth action in climate adaptation. Of course, that is no coincidence. This is a very serious subject matter for us, since we realize, especially since we have school students among us, who would know a bit of the philosophy of economics, where you have very scarce and limited resources and excruciating demands. Now, the scenario that we have with us today, we know that our land mass is limited. It has an absolute size. Our population doesn't have an absolute size. It keeps on increasing. And guess what? As it increases, we all are aspiring to a higher quality of life, which is predicated on a better well-being and, of course, great amount of economic prosperity. So we have the situation where we're going to have a lot of heavy demand being placed on better goods and services. Coupled with that, within the century that we are, through the advance we've seen in technology, where merchandise and goods and services are being done much more efficiently so that the prices are going down. So here it is, we have a situation, and it's a very complex one. Because, first of all, I give you the economic point of view that you're looking at looking at the situation of supply and demand, looking for a better quality of life. At the same time, you know that we really want to ensure that we reduce and even nullify the incidence of poverty. So we will all, on a social point of view, and of course on a political one as well, want to see prices go down. Well, we know what the situation is. If you know a little of economics, to tell you that when prices are low, you have very serious demands or a lot of consumption. So your supply has to keep on increasing. And as you know, the supplies are not limited. So it's a very interesting discussion this morning, since you're going to look at the real dynamism of looking at adapting, and of course adaptation is all about adapting to numerous things. And when we look at the economic thinking, it is predicated on three key pillars, where you look at adaptation, mitigation, and the whole question of damage and losses. Now, for The aspect dealing with adaptation is simply seeking to address how you can circumvent or reduce the adverse effect on the planet through various interventions. While when you look at mitigation, you're very much concerned in limiting the greenhouse emissions. And so you will see where we look at mitigation, we look more seriously at the issue of transportation and power generation. And the other aspect where we look at adaptation, it goes right across the spectrum, since we're looking at seeking to reduce land degradation, seeking to enhance biodiversity, ecological enhancement, even coastal degradation, all those issues that we have to contend with. Very importantly as well, since it's part of rewiring our thinking, you also have to pay attention to the marginalized ones among us, the people who are more vulnerable in terms of individuals and of course families. So before an event and even after an event, we have to be preoccupied with the safety and security of persons who are seriously challenged or who are vulnerable. So let us not think it's only a question of doing tangible physical things. So it's part of the thinking process as well. I am saying all these things because I really want to build up the discussion on looking at what are the causes or where we are today as a result of having to deal with climate change. And climate change is directly related to the whole question of extreme weather events. We all know it's not too long ago. I mean, even if you were in school, 7 years ago is not too long ago. We knew about the reality of Hurricane Maria. And so it's very important that CYEM is very mindful of the whole three pillars. While we are seeking to focus on adaptation today, but you have to be mindful of mitigation, and you also have to be mindful of damage and losses, because we are still grappling with the realities of the damage and losses that we had. We know the reality of the global commitment that say they were going to come to a rescue, but fortunately, we are a blessed country. We have a stable government was able to do what we had to do to deal with, first of all, with the shelter situation, and secondly, with the other infrastructure-related matters we have to do. Now for you, you really want to be also very interested in the whole question of how you sort of position yourself for getting involved in the dialogue, getting involved in the changing of mindset, getting involved in cultivating and developing the right attitude, the right choices, and of course that will lead to the right practices. I am saying all this because for you, first of all, as the members of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, and of course the Dominican branch, and more specifically too, I will want to appeal to Ms. Jeffers, since it has to start with the members of the group. If you're talking about calling for action in terms of climate adaptation, it has to start with a personal and individual responsibility. And why do I say that? The reason for this, we have to understand how we are a society. And it's very easy to look at it. We all come from families. Families constituted members of the families. And so it's what we bring to the table that first of all have to matter. So when we look at the whole question of climate change, it has to be something that we have to personally identify with. What can I do to change around the situation? By my thinking, by my belief, by my action, and of course by my advocacy. And that is very important. Because as we will know, of course, as school students, there's a very strong symbiotic relation between rights and responsibility. So while you have a right to a healthier environment, you also have a very serious responsibility for taking care of that environment. So that is exactly what I mean when I say it begins with self. And of course, we have to understand all the fundamental sectors that we will address and acquaint ourselves with when it comes to the environment. We all know about the forests, we know about the flora, the fauna, we know about the natural habitat that is there and all the living organisms. We know of the whole question of the air supplies. We know of the marine space. And very importantly as well, we have to concern ourselves with the human element as well. So when we speak of the environment, we are concerned about the natural environment and the built environment. And this is very important because I think as young people, you can rightly take your bragging rights to the highest level. You have distinguished yourself in ensuring that after so many years of competition, we now can say we have a champion at the World Olympics level. And again, it's not by coincidence we see so many SME guys here today. Mr. Kazemi have done wonders for us. Never in our history before we know that anyone doing the Caribbean school examination and at the same time doing CAPE and excelling in both of them. Usually, you will spend 2 or 3 years sometime at State College, just dedicating that same part of your life for your advanced studies. But he was able to do both, while at the same time being a very active, world-class, to be very soon, cyclist. So it's your moment to shine. It's your moment to show that you have what it takes. But as I said, it's not a question of just seeking to see how much demands you could make on authorities. And I really want to say that because I know very often we tend to believe when we are in various social groupings or organizations, it's all about how much we can lobby government to act. But you have to appreciate that for you in CYEM, as I said, it starts with self. You then have to see from a societal level how you can join and how you can partner with government organization, non-government organization, the schools, the social groups, and the various activity and other development groups to ensure that you can take your place in beginning to change the mindset, building the awareness, and of course, as I said, the advocacy for wanting to have a healthy environment. But all that is very good. But before you can venture into those things, you first have to understand why did this problem came about? What are the causes why we have such severe concerns today for climate change and extreme weather events? And I want to stimulate your thinking today with just 10 of the more fundamental causes of global warming. Because there is a direct connection between global warming and climate change. The first one I would want to touch on with you, and we're talking about situation where we have to look at the quality of life that we live. As I said earlier on, we really want to ensure our well-being and our economic prosperity is safeguarded and well looked after. So we'll get that in terms of goods and services. All of us will understand, and more so you than I, if we were to get a power outage right now, the first instinctive reaction from you would be to see how much life you have in your cell phone. Because without that cell phone connection, you know that your level of connectivity and of course your quality of life would be compromised to an extent. So one of the very serious needs that we have today is for electrical power generation. And of course, when we talk about the whole question of climate change and global warming, we have to think of the global context. And so from studies conducted recently by the environmental research letters, it shows that 5% of the 29,000 power plants surveyed were responsible for 73% of global generation of electricity. And as a result of that, they were largely responsible for the emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The largest culprit of those, we don't have any of those here in Dominica or in the region, but we know they exist in the more developed countries. The bigger culprit in this pollution was coming from coal plant power generation. And it is responsible in terms of looking at it from Europe, and even to a lesser extent, the United States of America. They are still responsible, I'm talking about coal plants, it's still responsible for about a third of all electricity generation. So we can well imagine the serious concerns that we should have from power plant generation of electricity, especially those seem to be used in the fancy term, and I'm sure most of you from the secondary school will hear about clean coal and the not so clean coal. But most of the plants that we're concerned about in existence today are still using what they refer to as the coal, on clean coal production. The second area of interest for us in terms of pollution causing global warming is agriculture. And the agriculture we're talking about, based on studies done by the World Bank, it is showing that about 19 to 29% of the total greenhouse gases emitted was contributed from agriculture. Now the GHG, which is the greenhouse gases, are not the only contaminants we're concerned about. We're also concerned about methane gas emission. And agriculture through livestock production is responsible about a third of all the generation of methane globally today. So you see, that is why you of young people are so actively concerned of pursuing agriculture in the new form. And as we refer to it, in the greener form. And I know as part of your activity on Saturday, you will be visiting some of the agricultural outlets that is using some of the more technologically advanced ways of doing that. The third heavy area of pollution causing global warming is transportation sector. And when we refer to transportation sector, we're talking about both land transport and aviation and shipping. And based on studies done in the United States, it is showing that about a third of United States greenhouse emission is coming as a cause of transportation sector. So for us, it has to be an equally concerning one. So as you see so far, based on what the research is showing, we in Dominica have been responsible or contributing most to any one of those things. But we are seriously dealing with the effects of those things. So we have to concern ourselves with that. Because those are the areas that you have to ensure that you have the necessary discussions so you can educate yourself and really bring yourself up to speed with some of the concerns and some of the interventions you could do to minimize those things. The others I will touch on, and I won't go too heavily into it. And I'll speak on the fourth one because Mr. Mitchell is there. We also have concerns in terms of some of the emissions that comes from landfill. And that is why landfill operation is such a scientifically demanding area today, because from landfill you could have, as you know, you'll have quite a bit of organic waste. And the organic waste, of course, after decomposition, you will have a tremendous amount of emissions of methane. And based on the statistics that have been done globally, it is showing that landfill operation is responsible for about 43% of all the methane gas emitted. The other concerns that I'll go about, I won't go too heavily into it, but I'll just tell you, it concerns offshore drilling, it concerns fracking, and fracking from you from school have to know that, is another form of ensuring that you introduce or you inject high-pressured water into the fossils deep within the Earth's surface, and as a result of that, it will force out gas, oil and gas from those fractures. We also have to concern ourselves with deforestation. And although through advocacies coming from people like yourself, globally we're seeing a decline in the contribution to global warming from deforestation. Right now it's accounting only for around 10% of that effect globally. The other one that is of interest to us is, of course, overfishing. We also have to concern ourselves with the melting of the ice caps in the northern hemisphere. And we also have to concern ourselves with the other one that we refer to as consumerism. Now, consumerism is very important. And as I told you earlier on, we have the situation today because we're dealing with excruciating demands and very limited resources. And as you know, as I said earlier on, we're looking in terms of improving our quality of life, rightly so, our well-being, on our economic prosperity. And so our level of consumption of goods and services has taken a higher tier. Interestingly, although we as consumers are doing so on an individual level, but our individual action is not what's going to make the significant changes to the effect of global warming coming from consumerism. And my reason for saying that is because the mega supply chains and the mega corporations involved in merchandising that is responsible for ensuring through marketing and other advertising means that we can stimulate demands and all those other things. And so the onus is on them to ensure at the end of the day that we can do our manufacturing and do our sales and, of course, our promotions in a more responsible way. But we as individuals have to also understand, we have to raise the level of consciousness to ensure that the more we become aware of those things, is the more we can reduce the incidence. Because to deny those things will only get it worse. So we have to understand this thing very clearly. Now, I really want to touch before I end to give you an appreciation as to where we are. Because for us in Dominica, our situation is one that is very unique. As you know, we pride ourselves as the nature isle of the Caribbean, soon to be the nature isle of the globe, of course, where we are ensuring that by our way of life, we understand the importance of our environment, whether we're talking about the forest or we're talking about the marine space. And as a result of that, we have reached landmark targets that the rest of the world is still trying to ensure that they can sustain. And I'm referring to the whole question of the Paris Agreement, where world countries had to ensure that they come across with what we call a nationally determined contribution to show how they're going to ensure that they take measures to reduce the impact of negative climatic conditions or environmental conditions. And so most of them would be expecting by the weight from 2030 to 2050 to be able to become carbon negative countries. But guess what? We in Dominica, one of the only English-speaking Caribbean country to become carbon negative. So where the rest of the world want in maybe 20 years' time to be carbon negative, we in Dominica are already carbon negative. Now that is on one side that you have to think very seriously as a plus in terms of our adaptation. And as I said to you, we also have to equally think of mitigation, although it's not your focus today. In terms of mitigation, you're looking for generation of electricity and our transportation sector. For generation of electricity, we know for years we have most of our power generation was coming from hydro. Afterwards, we get more into the fossil fuel because of that demands. But right now, you should know that we are constructing a 10 megawatt power plant from geothermal resource. So that is talking about renewable energy that almost very soon we will be able to see that all our supplies and need for power will be coming from clean renewable energy. So whereas I told you so far, we are carbon negative, but we are still ensuring that we continue to do things to ensure that we have a real negative carbon footprint. These are the things that you're supposed to know, because I'm saying all that while we're part of the Caribbean Environment Network. All of you, Ms. Jeffers and the other members of the team, have to be equally concerned that while you're part of those regional and international agencies, that you have to maintain a national interest. And why a national interest? Because the national interest is in your personal best interest. So when you go out there, you should be able to also champion to the rest of the world what you are doing as a responsible people. By letting them know that you're carbon negative, by letting them know that your power generation very soon, maybe in the next 2 years, will be coming from fully renewable sources, both hydro and geothermal. And of course, your forest cover is beyond measure, and Mr. Burton can attest to that, and you have him in the audience. I guess you will be able to challenge him later on that. But those are some of the fundamental concerns and issues I really wanted to bring to you and to let you know that you're going to be responsible for ensuring that you take the advocacy forward by ensuring that you engage the school students, and I'm referring to, of course, CYEM, engage the community groups, engage the church leaders, because we have to be looking at all the institutions of socialization. And of course, you have to be engaged yourself in doing practical things. Teaming up with Mr. Michel in ensuring that we have cleanup campaigns, teaming up with the ministry in terms of knowing what projects we are doing, and of course, Ms. Saunders, I trust you have shared it with your group already, because I know when we were looking at some of the adaptation measures for our road network, you were an integral part of that session, making very intelligent and practical contribution to those. So those are some of the thoughts I really want to share with you, and to let you know that we at the ministry are always and equally ready and available, and we are showing that by way of example today. We could start with Honorable Frederick, is a member of the discussion. You have in the audience Mr. Hunter, you have Mr. Florian, you have Michel, and you have myself. So I really want to wish you a very positive, instructive, and informative roundtable discussion, and I'm happy to be with you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blackmore. I'm sure your address was very inspirational to me as a young advocate myself. So now, guys, it's time to relax and let's get into an informative, discussion. So it's now for the roundtable discussion, and I would like to invite our moderator to take it over. Give her a hand.
Good morning, everyone. Protocol has already been established. As we gather here today, we're reminded of the power of youth, the strength of partnership, and the critical role we all play in shaping a sustainable future. With this distinguished panel, we are truly in for an insightful and inspiring conversation. Guiding our conversation today as moderator is none other than the Honorable Cozier P. Frederick, a leader deeply rooted in the environmental and cultural landscapes of Dominica. Honorable Cozier P. Frederick is the Minister of the Environment, Rural Modernization, Kalinago Upliftment, and Constituency Empowerment in the Government of Dominica. He is also the Member of Parliament for the Salibia constituency, which includes the Kalinago territory. His dedication to community service is reflected in his roles on the Dominica Reparations Committee and the Kalinago Events Committee. As a former Kalinago Affairs Development Officer and a school teacher, Honorable Frederick holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and Political Science from UWI Cave Hill. He has presented internationally on Kalinago heritage as an MPhil candidate and was the country coordinator for the International Caribbean Ties exhibition in 2019. He also founded the Salibia Heritage and Restoration Project and curated the Our Lives exhibition in the Smithsonian Museum of the North American Indian in Washington, D.C. Beyond his political career, Honorable Frederick is a researcher, martial artist, musician, visual artist, actively engaging with youth and civil society groups across Dominica. Our first panelist is Tiffany Marcel, a powerhouse in both educational and environmental advocacy, with her roles as a physics and math lecturer at Dominica State College, technical assistant at PISLM, and project coordinator at CYEN. Her passion for sustainable land management paired with hands-on farming shows her deep commitment to practical solutions. Constantly exchanging knowledge in all her roles, Tiffany's enthusiasm for the environment is very contagious. Next, we have Jansen Hillier, a 19-year-old storyteller from the scenic southeast of Dominica. Jansen has a gift for weaving narratives that blend Caribbean heritage with ecological stewardship. Though he didn't initially plan to dive into ocean advocacy, it wasn't long before he was swept up by the waves, literally. Through his involvement in Project CETI Marines Conservation Fellowship, today as the hub leader of Sustainable Ocean Alliance Dominica, Jansen continues to inspire local and global youth with his work. Although fairly new to the climate activism, he is already making a massive impact. Our next panelist, Imana Jeffers, comes from the vibrant communities of Citronia and Newtown, bringing over a decade of youth advocacy experience to the table. With degrees in economics, history, international relations, and trade policy, her work in various regional and international organizations, especially following Hurricane Maria, has placed her at the forefront of climate change discussions. She will also represent Dominica at the upcoming COP29 in Azerbaijan as part of the Climate Youth Negotiators Program. Truly an example of youth leadership in action. Finally, we have Ashfred Norris, an eco-social entrepreneur and digital humanist with a unique blend of creativity and activism. As the founder of the Astra Media Management Agency, Ashfred uses media, music, and storytelling to highlight the urgent issues of sustainability and climate action. He has represented Dominica on international stages, including COP23 and the UN Youth Climate Summit, and has contributed to youth-led climate projects like Plastic Tide, Turner's Challenge. A musician, entrepreneur, and advocate, Ashfred is a multidisciplinary force to be reckoned with. And with that, I am thrilled to turn things over to our moderator, Honorable Cozier P. Frederick, to kick off this discussion. Thank you.
I will begin at the podium as a politician, and I'll get to the table in a bit. I would like to change a few words this morning for the conversation. So I'll be using Whitey Kubuli to talk about Dominica. And I'll tell you why, because it's the name that the original people, which I'm part of, gave the nation. And I will say Whitey Kubulians as well. I'll use words like the regional archipelago, to mean the Caribbean. I'll use fancy words. But just to say that I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to be here among students. P.S. Blackman spoke about SME. I had the privilege to go to Dominica Grammar School. I still remember the entire school song, the greatest of all builders, wrought with his mighty hands, and all the songs. So I'm happy to have you here. And I'm really happy to have all the other students here who are really the gatekeepers to what we have as a beautiful country. For those of us listening and for the students here this morning, our program will be around adaptation. And it's very simple. It just really means that we have to adjust ourselves, our natural environment, our economic systems, and our social systems. That's what it is, adaptation. When we speak about climate adaptation, we have to do all of those things together. We have to look at strategies, we have to look at practices, we have to look at policies, all of those we have to change. We have to adapt. We have to make ourselves different. And all of these actions will have a lot of benefits for us. It will prevent major climate events, flooding, etc. And so this morning I really want to highlight and salute the folks here of the Dominica chapter of the Caribbean Youth Environmental Network. We want to salute you. Because I believe that you have a major task to keep Dominica or Haiti Kubuli alive. It's a big task because we always speak about the youth being the future, but the youth is now. And you have to start the work now. So I'm excited for this. I know that doing some research on the youth network, it was established in 1993 as a big movement. It's across a number of Caribbean islands. And Dominica, with its movement toward a first climate resilient country, then we have a good stance. I want to say for the public record, I'm hoping that the ministry will allow me to adopt the Dominica chapter as a youth arm of the ministry to do some serious work, because it is important that we do this work. All of you are here for a number of reasons. I have a lot of faith in youth, being one myself a few years ago. And because I think that youth have innovative ways of thinking, new vibes, new ideas. The old ways are cool, right? I love some of the old ways, the good old days. But no WhatsApp, no internet. Later, taking 6 months to get to England. I'm not so sure about that as a good old day. I mean, I like to see a fancy handwriting. It brings out penmanship and creativity, but a note would be much better on a phone, easy access. So I'm happy that you're here because in terms of the adaptation process we're in and climate adaptation, you have to be innovative, you have to think. The second thing I'm aware is that young people normally, when I was young, like you said, we kind of like trouble. We like to challenge things. And there's a nice little word for it. It's called advocacy. You need to challenge the status quo. You need to, it's not all right to do that, certain things. So sometimes you are misunderstood because you want to do things different. And because you innovate, you want to do things different, people think you're troublemakers. And if you look at universities across the world, colleges across the world, even high schools across the world, young people are the one leading charges. I was in grammar school in 19, oh my goodness, I'll tell you my age. In 1988, 89, when there was a massive factory across the grammar school, belching out fumes into the air. It was the lime factory. And the grammar school students went on the streets with placards and we were like, no more fumes. And we had to shut down the factory. So we see that you have to advocate. Now, what is crucial for you, that makes you important in this conversation today, is that you are what I would like to define as long-term stakeholders. You're there for a little while. I might be here for the next 20 years, but you as youth, you'll be there for longer than me. And when I say you will be here, it's not just in the Dominican space or the White Caribbean space, but you will have a long life. And whether you travel or you cross boundaries, you live in a different jurisdiction, the impacts of climate change will still affect you. So you're a long-term stakeholder. It is very clear to me from what I have seen just on our small island that you have the capacity to change. And for me, that's critical. That's why I'm happy to be here today, because you do have a capacity to change things, moving away from the old ways, keeping the old ways as good examples, but moving forward and adapting. So you yourself, by you existing as a young person in your school, in a community, you really are the definition of adaptation. And of course, like the members here who are part of the Youth Environment Network in the Caribbean, who will join the bigger global network, you are part of a bigger movement. You're not alone. It's a bigger movement. And your movement crosses all borders. So when you go off to the COP29 in Azerbaijan, there'll be some of you here I'm representing. When we go to the COP18 in Colombia, the Biodiversity COP, you will be there as well. And I'm hoping that when you do this, because Phyllis and I've been to some of this, that you will open your mind. You will see people who think just like you. So when you think you do something and you're misunderstood, there are many more like you across the world who are willing to lead that charge with you. So I think with your passion that you have innately, you will be good advocates. And good advocates from your schools. I saw 4-H badge just now. That's good. And I'm hoping that you're part of environmental clubs at your school. So we're happy to have you here, and to thank the teachers who accompanied you. And really again want to thank the PS for the very inspiring words. I must salute the work done by the Forestry Department, the directors right here, the Solid Waste Management Corporation, Florence Mitchell, and Mr. Edgar Hunter, who takes a lot of the burden of the policy on board. So I'm really happy to start this conversation. We have some very bright people here, and I'm hoping that you will leave with something, learn a little bit of something, and at the end ask a few questions, because the business of climate change is all of us business. If we want to keep our country clean and green and able to survive in it for a number of years, like my ancestors did for thousands of years, the Kanago people, we have to do our part. Play our part, be responsible, and take on our jobs seriously, because we can change as young people, and even if sometimes we are clearly misunderstood. So let the games begin. So I'm going to sit. So we have a program. I have a few questions. We have broken the engagement in a number of sessions. So we will ask every panelist the very same question, because if you realize they all have different backgrounds and expertise, even if they are very young people. So in the first session, we are going to, based on the work that they've been doing for the few years, we're going to define and discuss the importance of youth awareness in Dominica about the climate change and adaptation. Basically look at the cause and effects of what's happening. So we discuss based on your field of climate activism. In your opinion, what is the importance of youth awareness in Dominica about climate adaptation? I will start on my right with Ms. Jeffers, and you may proceed. We want to have a clock or something, a bell to ring, 5 minutes. We will go over time.
Yes,
we don't need that. I think we can run that nicely.
Yes, we can run that
yes,
nicely.
we can do this.
So to keep it short and sweet, good morning, everyone. I think I was introduced, so I am Imana Jeffers. And climate adaptation to me, when it comes to youth action, is basically, the minister summed it up nicely. It's just adapting to climate change in different ways, such as economic, social, etc., etc. And I believe that it starts with the youth, because guess what? You are going to be the future leaders. So it's important that you know what climate adaptation means, because when you're a leader, you're thinking of, okay, I'm a leader, so how I can shape my policies to adapt to the effects of climate change. You're an entrepreneur. How can I shape my business to adapt to the effects of climate change? You get into social in terms of gender advocacy or gender groups, and even health. So you're thinking of, as a doctor, as a lawyer, how can I shape my profession in a way that it is resilient? And we hear that word a lot, resilient, and it adapts to climate change. And as a youth, I believe that, it's important that you create that mindset from now. Because as you go on to university even, you have to think about even your profession. Because from climate change, you have a whole bunch of new professions and master's degrees. You can get a master's degree right now in sustainable development. You can get a master's degree in renewable energy resource management. you know, and these are things that wasn't there about 30 years or 50 years ago. So when it comes to climate adaptation, you're thinking about all of these things. You're adapting your profession, you're adapting your way of life. When you're building your homes, you're building your home that it adapts to climate change. So for me, that is what it means.
Morning, everyone. I will be brief as well. My name is Tiffany Marcel, and my area of climate activism is within the land management sector, specifically when it comes to agriculture. And so in Dominica and the larger part of the Caribbean, we have an aging farming community, which means that the vast majority of our farmers are around the age of 65. So what does that mean for you and our future? So if we don't have any young farmers, what's going to happen? We're going to have low production on food. When we have low production on food, we're going to have to dedicate resources that we could dedicate to something else to importing food. And when we import food, because of the resources that we have, and if they're limited, we might not have the best imports, right? So we're going to import poor quality food. If we import poor quality food, what happens then? Dominica already has an issue with non-communicable diseases, and this could be largely associated with the things that we eat. So when we're looking at youth awareness in the agricultural sector, it's important for you to know how you can become your own backyard farmer so that you can grow the things that you can eat and so that we can cut back on those food import bills, but also how you can educate the individuals around you when you see them doing something wrong as it pertains to agriculture and the environment.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
All right, I just want to start off by saying thank you for having me on this panel. My name is Janssen Hiller, and my area with climate activism and advocacy is through ocean conservation and marine management resources, through storytelling, that is, and youth engagement. So what I think of when I hear youth awareness about climate adaptation, I think the youth, I like to say this quote, is that the youth are yesterday's seeds, today's toil, and tomorrow's harvest. So when I think about the youth and when I think about Dominica on a whole, we have a wealth of coastal communities. And these communities rely heavily on the ocean as a source of food, but also as a source of income. And as you may well be aware, we have issues with our coral reefs. For instance, we have coral bleaching events happening right now, and that is very detrimental because our coral reefs act as barriers and protectors when we have sea surges during the hurricane season. And so in youth being aware of ways in which we can learn to adapt our mindsets towards climate change and climate adaptation, they can foster some type of movement and action to mitigate this. I believe that education and knowledge is power. So in empowering the youth through education and information, they can make sound decisions for the future. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashford Norris. My area of advocacy is in media, climate smart solutions, awareness, and youth engagement. So for me, my role comes in when after everyone speaks, I now think of ways that you will understand everything that they say. You get me? You get me, right? So after Emmanuel talks about the economic adaptation, financial sector adaptation, even adaptation in terms of our elderly or young people, adaptation generally across sectoral adaptation, and Ms. Marcel speaks about the ways we can adapt in terms of agriculture, farming, or food security, and Mr. Hillier speaks about ocean conservancy. Now, how do we synthesize all of these topics into concepts that each youth or all different groups of young people can understand it so that they can act upon it? So we can do all the research on our end, we can go out into communities, get all the data, but when it comes to, all right, the grassroots farmer, the man that has been farming for the past 30, 40 years, he's using slash and burn agriculture, this is his tradition, this is the practice, we need to let him know that, hey, certain things that you're doing are detrimental to the environment, and certain practices not necessarily needs to stop, but you need to learn how to adapt with your environment. If you're using a land that your customer burning it, you need to start thinking about how you can replenish your soil, how you can ensure that, okay, in the next 5 years, this land just doesn't stop producing. So on our end, in terms of media awareness and climate change, it's creating the stories. What songs can we write? What music videos can we come up with? What movies can we write? What books can we write that can really reach youth in all sectors of their interest, in all areas of literacy, that they'll be able to understand us when we speak, and when we leave the room, and even when we're not present in the room, you still have the concepts and the foundational tools to act upon what is right for your future, essentially. Thank you.
Yes, we have it here. We do have a wonderful space in Waitikubuli. It has a long history. I think the land space is about 100,000 years old. It came out of the ocean many moons ago. And it has a unique landscape. And that unique landscape has really crafted for us a survival mode. And so just to live on Dominica in itself, we have to adapt. And if you realize that every generation, every 40 years or so, a major event happens. The recent one in 2017, Hurricane Maria. Before that was Hurricane David in 79. Before that there was a massive hurricane in 1930. And every time people have to adapt. So that's what it is. And so by being a citizen of Waitikubuli, in a sense, you are defining adaptation, because you do it every day of your lives. And this wonderful space, like I keep saying all the time, it is handed to us by our ancestors, people who came, people who use the rugged land space. And when we speak about climate adaptation, we really have to look at, and like we were speaking about here this morning, the major shifters of that climate. Because I would argue, I've argued many times, that climate change really began when the first Europeans came and cut off all our trees in our wonderful islands and planted cane and cocoa and cotton. And even today we have the conversation, because they are now the developed countries and they have a responsibility to help us heal our lands. And so the next specific question here for Tiffany here, we will look at land management in itself, because it appears to us that the lands have been exploited, not for benefit in the past, for 400 years of slavery, for instance. And even today, when we have a more modern society, in the last 20 years, post-independence, we have had the exploitation of the land by the banana industry, for instance. So we have some issues. So Tiffany, tell us, how is land management and what we're talking about adaptation, how are they related? That's the first piece. And I would further ask, how can all of these young people here, including myself, youth, get involved in the national agenda that fall under land management? So we'll do the first piece. How is the land management and the definition of all this about adaptation, how are they related in the conversation?
So I'd like to touch on a few of the things. That you've already mentioned. You discussed Hurricane David and Hurricane Maria, but since Hurricane David, Dominica has actually had about 15 extreme climate events. So even though we don't call it a hurricane or we don't call it a tropical storm, think of 2 years ago when we had some rainfall and we had an entire mountain just slip off. So Dominica experiences extreme climatic events even outside of the hurricane season. And so when we're looking at land management, specifically from the agricultural standpoint, we see that a lot of the things that farmers use are maybe not as beneficial to our soil, or the ways that we plant, right? A lot of the important crops in Dominica are root crops, and those crops require us to dig up the soil, toil the soil, till the soil sometimes, and these things are breaking apart the soil. And so whenever we have heavy rainfall, what are some of the things that we see? I'm throwing the question out to the youth in the audience. What are some of the things that we see when we have heavy rainfall? Landslides, flooding. So all of these things can be results from bad agricultural practices, right? So if we have flooding events, those chemicals that we use in the soil They find their ways into our waterways, they find their way into the ocean, and it harms things that I'm sure Mr. Hilaire will discuss that cause coral bleaching, because we have all these chemicals entering the sea by ways of chemicals that we put into the soil. So when we're looking at how land management and adaptation are related, we have to adapt the ways in which we do our agricultural practices. We talked about the banana industry. We need to move away from a monocrop system and look at a more intercropping system, because sometimes when we just have one crop, we see if a disease has entered into the topic, these sectors can just fall, like our banana industry did, right? So you have to look at different ways in which you can incorporate and adapt and build your agricultural practices as future farmers, I hope, fingers crossed. And then how can Dominican youth also get involved in national, regional adaptation actions that fall under land management? Well, specifically in Dominica, I'm a technical assistant for the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management, which is PISLM. And we have 2 projects in Dominica, which is the Sustainable Land Management Project, which dealt a lot with farmers. And we had the Post-Maria project, which dealt a lot with reforestation and building back our watersheds. And soon enough, we will have phase 2 of a soil care program. So I would encourage you and encourage your schools, encourage your teachers, encourage your parents to see how you can get involved with PISLM. See what they have going on with the ministry, see what they have going on with forestry, see if some students from your school would be interested in doing some reforestation efforts, and get involved with PISLM that way. I would also like to advocate for you all to join CYN, which is the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, and see how you yourself can be an advocate for the environment. Thank you.
So I just want to ask a question to you, because you mentioned about land management, and just a little while ago, I think I was part of the stakeholder awareness group for the coastal management. So land management is not only inside, but it's also on the coast, because in terms of how we build our roads, I guess, it breaks down the land, and also it contributes to landslides. So in what ways can we basically structure the land, and how the youth can also get involved in terms of knowing, even when they get older, when they're building, proper drainage is important. And that's something that we see a lot in Dominica. People build, and they don't build drainage around their homes, and then there's heavy rainfall, and then there's a landslide behind their house or around their house, and they have to spend more money in terms of, grading their land properly and so forth. So how can the youth kind of, get to be aware now, so that when they become adults, they don't have to deal with these things?
Well, I think it would be best if some of the things that you mentioned, as students, you're not really capable of doing those things. But there are people or adults in your life that are capable of doing these things. So I would try to encourage and inform your parents of the different initiatives, because some of the things that you discussed are very simple. So building proper drainage, you can contact people within different ministries that could help you build better drains. We have indigenous things here in Dominica, for example, the vetiver plant that can reduce leaching of different chemicals and stuff into our coastal areas, but it also keeps the land very stable. You can encourage people to, instead of planting so many root crops or so many vegetables on the side of hills, maybe we could move forward and plant more tree crops. So in those ways, I think probably you can encourage the adults in your life, but you can also, if you don't know some of the things that we've discussed today, you yourself can go on Google, on YouTube, in different areas and research these things yourself and see how you can inform yourself and how you can inform others. And also, everybody here at this table and within the Caribbean Youth Environment Network are willing to speak to you. People in the ministry are willing to speak to you. So if you have questions, just ask. Nobody here bites. And we would be very happy to inform you of all the information that we have.
And also, you mentioned how the youth can get involved. So I think now is the perfect time to mention that PISLM and CYN has 2 competitions. The prize is $750 US. So it's an essay competition and it's a photo competition. And we're waiting for your, for you to submit. The photo competition is easy. The essay competition, 1,500 words, 1,500 words, and it's about how soil matters to you. So I hope that you took down points so that you could go home, jot down the notes, and go for that $750 US.
Thank you very much. So the youth energy right here. So here's an interesting fact. Most of our settlements on the island are on the coast. If you go across our country, it appears to me that land management was a serious thing that was considered by our ancestors. The villages of Bells and a few other internal villages are only new villages in the last 50 years, while we were cutting roads across the country. So it appears to us that the Kalinago ancestors and the Negma or the Maroons were very smart. We built none of our villages are more than 1 mile from the coast. And so it means that we're not affecting the water resources, we were not destroying all of the lands, and that's why for more than 200 years in the colonial experience, Dominica could not be exploited by Europeans, and that's why today Dominica is very pristine, because even our ancestors understood the importance of managing the lands that we had. Because if you look at our land, and when you could do it as a science project, if you do the assessment of your land, the land is very steep, it's a lot of sloping lands. The depth of the lands for agriculture is very thin, and so our ancestors were very wise to use those lands around the coast, manage it carefully, plant the vetiver, do terracing, plant away from the rivers, and all of that was important for land management. But an important thing about our island, we are a small island state, but we are a big ocean country. And so it takes us into the next part of our conversation, how do we treat the ocean? Because the ocean also affects what happens on land. And what happens on land affects the ocean in many ways. For instance, we speak at the ministry the concept of from the turf to the surf. It means from the land to the ocean. Because if there's pollution, for instance, you toss a plastic container out of a car window while you're driving up into the countryside, it gets its way into the ocean. And of course, it affects marine life. And so a specific question for Janssen here is that, how is ocean conservation and adaptation related? So we have already the answer of land management, and how does your work in conservation or your understanding conservation, how is it connected to adaptation? And the second part of the question, we will look at what are the measures you could take on as youth to ensure that we can manage our marine life so that we have a good product for the future. And so Janssen, your call.
Thank you. So before we start, I just want to iterate, what exactly is ocean conservation? So ocean conservation is talking about protecting and restoring marine ecosystems to maintain biodiversity and essential services. I'm going to ask a question. Anyone here is an aspiring marine biologist or wants to work in the field of marine biology? You? That's amazing. And out of an entire room of about, 30 students, there's only one student interested in marine biology. And there's a common misconception that work in the conservation sphere is not lucrative, and that is false. This year, as well as moving into the future, conservation work is constantly increasing. There are constant job openings for persons interested in ocean conservation, but not just ocean conservation, conservation on a whole. And then we talk about climate adaptation. Climate adaptation basically is adjusting to climate change to mitigate effects on humans and nature. When you talk about people's responses to climatic events or how they prepare for climatic events so they don't get affected too badly. It is all interconnected, ocean conservation, land management, climate adaptation, because in the Caribbean, marine ecosystems are crucial for our livelihoods. We have many coastal ecosystems, many coastal communities, as Honorable Frederick mentioned. And in those communities like Coliho, Layu, even Pottersville and Newtown, they heavily rely on fishing as a form of income and as a form of sustenance. And Dominicans on a whole, because some people, according to their diet, they cannot have meat, so they will eat fish. And fish is high in protein, and you know how protein is vital to our living, right? So this is just a fraction of how it's interconnected. Now, when we look at collaborative adaptive measures for Dominica's land and marine life, we can talk about research and innovation. Youth involvement in what we call citizen science, which is basically just involving the citizens of a country to look at ways they can research problems that arise in the ocean, right? To provide valuable data for ways we can adapt. The ministry, in collaboration with the youth, could fund marine research initiatives to support training for ocean monitoring technologies. They could also encourage external research and conservation projects to involve local youth, because oftentimes what we see is we have external parties and research initiatives coming into Dominica, and they do not involve local expertise or the youth. I can give an example, Project SETI, of which I was a fellow for the past year, 9 to 10 months, and I know they have collaborated with the Ministry of Environment and as well as the Ministry of Fisheries, Blue and Green Economy. So things like that, and it was through this fellowship that I got inspired to pursue marine biology, and as well as highlighting coral restoration projects. Do you know that there is currently a coral restoration project in Soufriere, right in Dominica? You do? Awesome, that's great. And so in highlighting that, because I thought that a lot of people don't know about it because we don't speak about it, you don't see it a lot in the media. However, it is happening, and it's happening on a small scale. And we are surrounded by coral reefs, not just in Soufriere, but also along the west coast in Dominica, in Portsmouth, Cabrit, which is another marine protected area, as well as Soufriere. So what could occur is that this small project in Soufriere could be upscaled, and it could involve a nationwide effort to involve the youth to participate in coral restoration, because we know how important coral reefs are to our survival. For one, when you have a healthy coral reef, you have an abundance of fishes and marine life around. And two, when we have storm surges, incredible storm surges from the increasing hurricanes, it acts as a natural barrier. So when the waves break, they will break over the reefs. But the reefs are adapted in a way that they do not get harmed when the waves break over them. They simply act as a protective barrier. And so youth-led restoration efforts can help protect coastal areas from rising seas and increased intensity hurricanes. And the ministry could support that in a number of ways by providing trainings, resources, and other collaborative efforts like educational sessions and roundtable discussions like this, so people can be aware of what is going on our beautiful nature isle. And when we come to talk about sustainable land and marine use, they are intertwined, as mentioned, from the rivers to the sea, from the mountain to the sea. You go in a pocket, say you throw a bottle somewhere. Why would you do that? It's going to end up in the ocean, because the valleys are connected to streams, streams are connected to rivers, rivers connected to the mouths of oceans to the oceans themselves. And these plastics are not good for ourselves, they are not good for the environment. And we can also talk about microplastics, because when these plastics go into the ocean and they start to degrade, the fishes are going to, eat those little microplastics. And you know where they're going to end up? Question, where are they going to end up? Where are those microplastics that the fish eat going to end up? Right inside our systems, and our systems cannot break down those microplastics. So it is a problem. Now, there's still a lot of research going into microplastics and how they affect the human body. So when we're looking at land management, we also need to look at runoff from farmlands into ocean spaces and looking at how we can mitigate that with climate-smart approaches. For example, one of the initiatives that's currently going on in Dominica is the SAC project, Sustainable Agriculture in the Caribbean, of which I am a climate-smart agriculture intern as of recently. And so I've seen ways in which the project has implemented climate-smart approaches to agricultural problems. For instance, you have a pest, and it's ravaging your crops, probably some whitefly, and it's coming around and it's just destroying your crops and you can't make money. Instead of using a pesticide that is not good for the environment, what I've seen they use is this sticky tape. And what it does is it traps all of these pests and other flying insects as well that are harming your crops. And that is a climate-smart approach. So it's things like that. Things that do not harm the environment, but you can still have your livelihood, you can still make your money, and you can still, function as a farmer in the economy. Another way we can look at is marine protected areas, strengthening the laws and the zones when it comes towards those essential areas to our ecosystems when it comes to the water. We already have one in Soufriere and we have one in Cabrit. Has anyone been to the Scott's Head diving shop to do some snorkeling? No, you have not? Okay. I see some people have. But if you have not, you need to go down there and see the beauty of those coral reefs. Let me tell you, under the water there, it's amazing, it's incredible. You need to see it for yourself. One of them days, a Saturday or Sunday, go down there, tell your mommy, tell your daddy, bring me Soufriere, please. Souple, I want to see the reefs. Okay? And in understanding the beauty and you seeing these things for yourself, you will be inspired to take action and protect what is yours. Well, it's not technically our own, but it's been handed down. And then you can hand that down when you protect it. It will be there for generations to come. And so strengthening the laws of those areas will ensure that these resources are managed correctly. We also are going to establish the world's first sperm whale reserve in Dominica. Isn't that amazing? Right? All right. And so in doing that, we not only raise awareness of the importance of these organisms and these ecosystems, but we also are saying that we, the Nature Isle, care about our ecosystems and we care about how we manage them and how they are going to be here for years to come. Another way we can look at, sorry, I'm going on, but I really love talking about the ocean, is innovation. The youth, sometimes I like to say the youth is rebellious, but it's not rebellious, no? And I would like to encourage you to listen to the older generation. They might tell you, do this one way, and you might say, well, what are you talking about? No, But it's important to have their support, and it's important to listen to what they have to say, because they know how things have been. They know that these are some of the steps that you take to mitigate this problem. However, from our perspective, we might have a new way we want to implement. And what we can do is we can work with the older generations to implement new solutions that not just include the old ways of doing things, but also the new ways. And there's a whole conversation that we can have about how the older generations also have to be receptive of our new ways of doing things, because sometimes you may say, oh, Granny, it's not letters again, it have nice WhatsApp and emails, and you may go, oh, you're doing that, that's fun. Don't show me when I don't want to do that, it's too much work. And then when you show her, she's like, oh, okay, so it's just press, and send, okay? All right, nice. And I want to ask, how many of you have been to Purple Turtle area, like as of in the last month or so? One of the things you'll notice when you go down to Purple Turtle is that's my time? Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just finish this really quick. One of the things you'll notice is the sea has eroded, the beach. It don't have beach. And that's sad. I went down there the other day and I was like, wow, what's going on? And that is from Hurricane Beryl. So that's just to show that as the years go by, coastal erosion is going to become worse. And coastal communities that rely on the ocean for their livelihoods and their incomes are going to suffer greatly. So, as I said before, the youth are yesterday's seeds, today's toil, and tomorrow's harvest. I want to implore each of you to become stewards, not just of the ocean, but of the environment, so that it will be here, it will be protected by the youth, because you are fire. Trust me. Sometimes if they give you a mic like they give me today, you will give them the fire, all right? And it's important to collaborate among yourselves, collaborate with the resources that are available, like the ministry is always there to support youth-led initiatives, and we will make a change. We can make a change. We will make a change, and it will be tangible. Thank you, everybody.
A very passionate presentation. I just want to follow up from where Jansen left off. And we know, apart from doing this today as an engagement, we need to do more so that there are gaps in what we're doing. So that's one piece I want us to share on this. But also, I would like you guys to speak to the young people here to say what is it specifically? There are special things that they can do, specifically to have the greatest impact on the national and even the regional climate adaptation action. So I will start with you, and we will go around the table here. Thank you.
Okay, so by now we've had the conversation going for quite a while, almost half an hour going out, you guys would say? So by now you check in, you pick up something. No, or you check in, or not in school, or you don't want a pop quiz. So just to start off, I want to hear from you. Even before stepping into this room, you can tell me what is one way that you thought you could have dealt with climate change or an issue in your environment, and right now you're here. Do you think that that was the right approach before coming today? So I want at least one brave young person to tell me an idea you had on how you could deal with, like we're talking about generally, climate change, environmental issues. You probably learn it in class, probably learn it in school, right? Oh, don't tell us, say something. Say, I will say something. Are you ready? All right, so one brave young person, one young person. If we had points, I'll give points to this school. All right, look, we have a brave young lady right there. Let's clap for everyone. Nice, nice. Okay, so tell me just one way that you had in mind that you could have dealt with a climate issue or environmental issue, and being here today, do you still think that that was the right approach? Tell me.
First of all, I want to say good morning, everyone. One initiative I used to think before was a good way at combating climate change. I think this was a big project before. Actually, it was a reforestation project, and I think it was plant a tree. This was a big thing. And I was talking about it before, like with my friends, and I think people would try to contribute to this project by just planting a tree, but then there's a lot of thought that has to go into that. You have to think about where you're planting the tree, what tree you are planting, if a tree has been here before, if you are taking nutrients from the land. So being here today just made me realize there are lots of thought into reforestating than I thought there was.
Nice. Okay. So from my end, simply one way that we as young people can combat climate change is just speaking up. That's it. Your stories are so important that on the international scene, once you step there, the other young people that have been thinking they're doing climate activism for 20, 30 years, well, by that time they wouldn't be youth. But, but that is the reality. You will step into a youth forum and you will see people who are way beyond your years, way beyond your experience, way beyond your knowledge. How do you set yourself apart from the fold? How do you set yourself apart from everybody there? You tell your story. How many people have been for Hurricane Maria? How many? If you were in Dominica, you went for Hurricane Maria. So roughly, there's about only 75,000 people out of the billion people in the world who can attest to that situation or that experience. So going in the international scene, it's really important. Me getting involved in climate advocacy started in 2017 after Hurricane Maria. Before then, I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did science and business. I was checking. I go in college. Whatever there for me, there for me. But during that summer period, doing an internship at DBS, the Dominica Youth Environment Organization was there representing CYEN at the time. And they had an essay writing competition just to talk about what can we do as young people to combat climate change. One day on my break in DBS, I just go in the audio room, write a quick essay. The deadline was the same day. I ran down to the youth division headquarters, I think it was across from 8 Bank at the time. Gave my essay. By the next week, they were like, okay, we have 5 young people going to Jamaica. You have to represent Dominica. Maria happens. We're not able to have a presentation. No, we don't have light. We don't have internet. There are like 8 other Caribbean countries. They're ready to present. And Dominica is just like, well, we had the biggest event of the year. Like, that's something. So from that presentation, the entire Caribbean was affected by just that one presentation. to the point that it was a Japan-Caribbean climate change partnership, to the point that the next day of the conference, where there was a larger audience inviting media houses and everything, they asked Japan and Dominica to redo their presentations again so that the wider audience would be able to hear those stories. From there, myself, Dominica, and Jamaica represented the entire Caribbean young youth perspective at COP23 in Germany, and then at a few UN conferences in New York following that. So your stories are important. Don't ever make somebody make you feel as though like you're talking too much. Close your mouth. What you say not making sense. You can easily just go on yo, bro, that making sense. TikTok says it. Now, don't believe everything you see on TikTok, but I would say that the climate activists, they on something. So be aware. Look at what you're taking in. There are stories that can help you build your story. If you like writing, write something. If you like singing, get into music. There's always something that you can do to push your stories. There's something that you can do to build advocacy. And like Jansen said, the environment is always to pass on to the younger generation. So if we grow up in Dominica, clean air, fresh water, you can walk where you want. I don't want when my child come up to be like, well, you can't go outside, wear a mask. I mean, it's not because it's COVID, but just the air. Are you find that making sense? Don't drink the pipe water, it's dirty. And not because heavy rain pass, that's just the water in the pipe. Are you find that making sense? We have currently one of the cleanest water supplies in the world. So do you find that those realities when you get older, you find that making sense to tell that to your child? That's something, even right now, that's something crazy. So you have to be aware of the environment that you currently occupy and what do you want that environment to look like in 20, 30 years from now. It is our responsibility and that is our challenge. So are you up to the challenge? I can't hear that. Are you up to the challenge? Yes. I can't hear that. Are you up to the challenge? Yes. All right. Thank you very much.
If there's one message is to speak up. Speak up, speak up. Jeffers?
So, Ashra said a lot. But I will just share one quote with you, and that is a quote that I would have heard a couple of years ago, and it stuck with me. And that quote is by the past Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, and that is, "You are never too young to lead." And I want you to repeat after me. I am never too young to lead. Say it. I am never too young to lead. Good, because we are not too young to lead. So there are ways to get your voice to be heard. You have different groups, you have different associations. When it comes to climate change, that is one area in this world of international development that your voice matters. Because guess what? We are a vulnerable group, right? Climate change affects us the most. Because when a hurricane happens, we are the ones who have to, we cannot do anything for ourselves. We don't have any economic power. We don't have any real strength to go and build anything for ourselves. If we don't have our parents, then we are left with basically nothing. Our mental health gets affected, our own health gets affected, our education gets affected. But guess what? And I want to say I'm proud of every one of you here because after Hurricane Maria, we came back and we didn't let that stop us, and all of us are here in school. In some countries, they don't have that privilege, right? Natural disaster displaces youth, right? And we have to think about how can we share our concerns with the rest of the world, not just Dominica, because we can do it on the national level, yes, but our voices are heard globally. And all of us here today will be representing Dominica in one way or another in an international conference. And we will be speaking on your behalf. It is up to your benefit that you come to us and tell us what you want us to tell them. Don't make us just go up there and say things and your voice, is not part of it. We want to hear from you, yes. How can we hear from you? And I think what is lacking in Dominica, to Minister, is that we don't have that coordination and unity among groups, among the ministry, and among the schools. And we need to get that going. So even the schools can reach out to the groups. We don't have to come to you and beg. And sometimes that's the case. We have to go to the school groups and we have to beg them to take part in an initiative. And then when we go out there, we're missing this culture and voice. Whose fault is that, right? It shouldn't be a matter of begging. When we go up to the schools should come and say, okay, yes, we're on board. It's not something to think about. It's for our benefit at the end of the day. And you, the young people, can go up to the school and say, we need this to happen. Don't wait on your, if your principal tell you no, you have to prove to them negotiation starts at a young age. All right? You have to prove to them and you have to tell them, yo, this is for our benefit, and you can. Be brave, you can. This is for our benefit, and we think that the school should partner with this group to either for capacity building purposes, for technical assistance, for a project that you have with the planting, you can come to us. It's okay. You know, you have an initiative, you think of a plan, you want assistance, reach out, and you can go and tell your school, we want them to be a part of it. So again, it takes everyone, and you are never too young to lead. And I'm saying this very shortly because time is running out, and I want to keep it short. So, and another thing that we want to address again with the coordination, we know that, you know, Minister, you know our problem in terms of our access to finance. I was at a climate youth negotiations training in England not too long ago with the rest of the Commonwealth islands, or countries. And we had one major problem, access to finance. And everybody was calling for it, from the Pacific Islands down to Africa. Everyone was calling for access to finance and access to technical assistance. Yes, we're young people, but you know, our brains are not that much developed as yet. You know, we're still in the developmental process, so we need the elders to, you know, to help us a bit. Give us some technical assistance, even if not financial, but at least technical assistance. And when we come to you, you know, we want somebody to be on board, and be on board quick. Be on board very quick. We know you have a lot of things to do, but I think once we have that collaborative effort between the forestry division, you have the young lady saying about planting, get on board with it. Don't wait for her to come to you. She said it. She expressed her interest. She's young. Get on board with it. Call CYN, see how it can happen. Dominica Solid Waste Management Authority, we have the beach cleanups there. It's about, again, collaboration. Yes, you give us the bags. Yes, you set up the recycling trucks for us. But we want that call out to the whole of Dominica to say, we are going to do a coastal cleanup next week, and we want everybody on board. That includes hotels, that includes businesses, that includes the ministry. And again, the media is important. That's where the media comes in. We want it to be in everyone's faces. So we know that is there on DBS, but we want it to be seen, we want it to be heard by majority of Dominicans. We can't get everybody, that's natural, but we want it to be heard by majority of Dominicans. So how can the youth be really and truly involved? Get yourself involved, that's one thing. You have the power. Always remember that, you have the power to get involved. You have the people there who cares and want to see you involved, so get involved. Don't wait till you see somebody else traveling all over the place and you say, but wait, how comes that person traveling all over the place now? And I know getting that opportunity. No, because you have to get yourself involved. They push for themselves to get involved. That's why they have the opportunity. So it is there for you, so take it.
Thank you very much. I think we're wrapping up. We're going to have to wrap up. I really want to thank the students for being here this morning and the passion that comes out of all of you here on the table. And I'm sure that you will share your contact information with all of the group in here so you could have the conversation going forward. From the ministry level, from the government level, we're heading out to a few major conferences before the end of this year. We have the COP 29 in Azerbaijan, Baku. We have the Biodiversity Cup in Colombia. We have the UNCCD Cup in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So all of these are important conferences. And like Jeff has said here, we have to have the voice of the youth to speak on behalf of you when we get there. I really want to thank everyone for having this morning. But before we close, do we have any questions as we wrap up? Anybody have any, or comments? Who wants someone to say something? As there's so much passion on the table, but we could share some of the passion from the audience.
Our friend from marine biologist, you had your hand.
Yes. Thank you so much. Share with us, please.
What I really wanted to know about was how to really protect most of the marine biologists around the world because of some of the creatures inside of the sea. I can't really suggest some things, but because my mind is really blank right now, so I don't have most questions.
Well, thank you for your question. One of the ways, I know like the Earth is surrounded by 70% of water, and that is a lot of water. And we have only discovered less than, but Jay, don't kill me now, less than, less than 5% of that. Thank you. Less than 5% of that has been discovered and explored. And it can be daunting. It is daunting when you have to think of all of that, all those precious animals that we want to try and take care of and preserve and conserve. So one of the ways that you can get involved is by what we've been saying, getting involved in local initiatives. You see a beach cleanup poster, you say, okay, I want to go to that beach cleanup. And then you will meet people, you will network, and you will find opportunities that are for you. And when you get those opportunities, as long as they resonate within you, and you know this is what you want to do, grab it, and don't let it go, all right? For instance, I'm currently leading a group, SOA, Sustainable Ocean Alliance, Dominica. And it's recently established, and it's a group for young people in empowering them in ocean conservation and climate activism. So it's things like that you look out for. You look out for these opportunities that expose you to information about ocean conservation, and you can build your skill set and your technical knowledge on how to approach ocean conservation from a youth standpoint. But another thing you can do is talk about it. You see somebody throw a piece of a bottle from a window, you say, hey, don't do that. This is going to end up in the ocean. It's not good. Or you yourself, if they don't want to pick up that bottle, you go pick it up yourself and find the nearest trash can and throw it in. All right? So speaking up is an important point of being active in ocean conservation and conservation in general, conservation efforts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I really like to say that this piece of information was really, really, really helpful because personally, I thought, climate was just global warming and that's it. And when I hear ice cap melting, I check it, we won't change, everybody cover. So I hear volcano by there, I say, Jesus coming. So now I really, really, really like to say thank you for this message. And it's really true because that have to open up to the media because we're having all kind of things on the media. So like personally, I think somebody have to come, since we have younger people, like come and just express all them things there.
Good morning to all. I had a question, well, say. We were speaking about, how certain plants, etc., even though they are trying to help, they are still emitting like methane into the atmosphere, destroying the greenhouse, all of that, right? My question is, can we not implement, for example, wind turbines more in Dominica, as it is sort of a safer, more, what's what I'm looking for? Like a better way to approach, like helping to provide energy to Dominica, etc.
So you spoke about, so I guess you're speaking about manufacturing, right? In terms of manufacturing and so forth, in terms of or manufacturing. Yes, well, I think, and that is something I always think about because I'm involved in terms of business development and trade. And in terms of trade, you know that because manufacturing, for us to make the money from manufacturing, we need trade, right? So in terms of trade, we're looking at green emissions green emission type of trade. So instead of using the gases, you're looking at safer forms of trade. In the manufacturing plant, that's where the geothermal energy comes in. And again, incorporating things like the solar energy, that's where it comes in. So those types of practices, we still need to advocate for. And we need to ensure, even that's for you, because as you get older, Dominica don't really have manufacturing going on so much so right now on a large scale. But as you get older, you want to look at businesses and you want to look at ways to develop yourself. So if you think about doing manufacturing, and we have great examples here, like JD's Naturals, and she incorporates sustainable ways of manufacturing in her business. So you can look at these examples as to how to create businesses that is sustainable and is safe for the environment.
And I'd like to add a bit to that. First of all, I really like your process of thinking. Dominica is in a unique position that we can be 100% green energy. We can be the blueprint for everywhere within the world, right? We have the capability of geothermal, solar, we have a hydro plant, we have the capability of a windmill, we see one at Rosalie. So we have the opportunities to continue to extend these green forms of energy. And I'd like to say, the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, we want to ensure that we continue building youth in that area. On Saturday, we're going to have a green energy tour. We're going to be taking some students from academics and the Dominica State College, but we hope to push that into the high schools and primary schools as well. So you can not only see how these form of energies are operated and how they are managed, but you can also see new opportunities, right? You're still in high school, you probably don't know what you want to do yet, so you can see different employment areas that you could move into going into the future. So just keep in mind that Dominica has the capability of doing these things, and it could be you that's doing them.
So everyone here this afternoon, I would like you to join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. Or do we have one more question or comment? Yes, we have one more. Now is your time, for sure.
Good afternoon. I have a question. So basically, right, I like your talk on the ocean, right? But how can we as a country and a community can ensure, like, place measures and rules in order for, like, people to stop litter the country? Because at the end of the day, like you say, it going into streams and rivers and certain areas, which at the end of the day will come back, like, for example, they are flowing down into the rivers, and we extract to Wasco, they take water from the rivers, which we have to drink. So it goes into the tank, which dirties the water, and at the end of the day, have to put chlorine in it, which will, at the end of the day, affect our body. So how can we as a community and a country put rules and measures in place so we can stop littering and stop pollution of the island?
But I was listening, he's asking the question right in front of one of the representatives from Solid Waste Management. But that was a very comprehensive question. And in response, I'd like to say that one of the points that I actually had to talk about was in relation to this, is educational campaigns, social media campaigns. The government can partner with local initiatives and local groups to reach out to different communities and different schools to sensitize them and teach them about the importance of taking care of the environment, of being environmental stewards. And so when everyone is aware of what is wrong, then everyone can hold each other accountable to do the right thing, all right? And so that is very important when we're talking about littering policies and how to properly manage waste. So I think strongly that educational drives is one of the best ways to go about reaching every person on the island.
I see one more hand, so let's keep it going,
Sorry for making you guys run lengthy. I've been wanting to say this since the girl from grammar school went. What she said also had an effect on me. I feel like all of this was very surprising, yes, but a lot of us are here on behalf of our schools, like grammar school. I know you have plenty children, I don't know how much you have, but I know there are plenty children. There's around 500 of us over at Convent, and again, I'm not sure how much children SME has, but I feel like we should try to incorporate these type of forums in a way that all of us can hear, because we're going to go back to school today, yes, but we're going to go back to get into classes, so we can't tell our friends what we've seen or heard today by the time it's lunchtime. And if you're like me, with a very short-term memory, by the time lunchtime comes around, you've forgot a lot of the things that have been said. So I feel like this should be incorporated in, should come to schools and talk to them. And then again, the schools do not have time to hold these forums. So we should do it on a large scale, you know, talk to CXC and have these incorporated into curriculums, you know, have classes about this. And like this, like Miss said at the beginning, Miss Jeffers, at the beginning of the discussion, she said that there are degrees these days in things like sustainable energy and climate change. We should have these type of courses at CXC, you know, so it doesn't just start at the level where you're getting your master's, it starts at the level where you're getting your secondary school degree. You know, if you want to start, you start young. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a good note to pause. I will say nothing more. But to say, let's put our hands together for these panelists here. Join me. I'm going to hand over back to Ferguson so we can wrap it up. But I think we had a good engagement. And definitely at the ministry, we're going to take it up to reach out to the schools to ensure that we share that love and that passion that you have here today. Ferguson, you're going to take it away from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Frederick, and all of you guys for engaging in the discussion. So now, unfortunately, our national coordinator, Ms. Mawson, is out of Dominica, but she did send a video that we're going to play. It's the vote of thanks. So, guys, listen up.
So everyone, thank you all for taking the time to attend this roundtable discussion on shaping climate adaptation. I am Nicole Mawson, National Coordinator of CYEN Dominica Chapter. I couldn't be present with you all today, but I'm here in spirit. With rising concerns of climate crisis on our doorstep, it is imperative that discussions like these are held, as all hands are needed on deck to shape climate adaptation solutions for our country and the region at large. I would like to thank our moderator for this roundtable discussion, the Honorable Kosi Frederick, Minister of Environment, Rural Modernization, Kalinago Upliftment and Constituency Empowerment, also other representatives from this ministry. A notable mention to P.S. Lucia Blackmore for his feature address today, Darren Lloyd, Junior Minister, and Senior Technical Advisor, Edgar Hunter. I would also like to thank our sponsor for this event, PISLM, and notably, Mr. Johan James, Project Manager of PISLM Dominica. A special thank you to Rhoda St. James from the Dominica Solid Waste Management Corporation, the high schools from the Roseau District and their representation, the Dominica State College Environmental Club, the Academic School of Learning students, UE Open Campus, and the media for their presence. Also, a huge thank you to the CYEN panelists for their contributions to this discussion. Thank you all. We look forward to further discussions and collaborations as we work together to address the impact of climate change in our country and region.
So guys, thank you so much for being here. Now we have some refreshments outside as well as a networking activity. So get to network with CYN Dominica, and of course, we do have a QR code here. You can scan it. It will take you to our website and social media pages. Do press the follow button, of course. Thank you so much, and don't forget, there you will get information. And we're also welcoming you guys to get a picture with all of us outside. Thank you so much, guys.